It all begins on one quiet night, when a single father stands up in a library and reveals the war medal he carries from his best friend who died saving him. But in the back of the room, a billionaire widow is listening. And the moment she hears his story, her heart breaks, and she falls for the man who's never stopped blaming himself for surviving. What starts as an unlikely love story soon explodes into scandal, because hidden inside her late husband's empire are secrets about the very night his friend died. Secrets that could destroy everything. Can a grieving father and a lonely widow turn pain into healing, or will the truth about the medal tear them apart forever? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The autumn evening settled over the small-town library like a warm blanket, casting long shadows through the tall windows. Outside, maple leaves danced across the sidewalk in the gentle breeze, their rich colors matching the weathered brick of the building. Inside, plastic chairs scraped against the worn carpet as people filed into the community room. Jack Hawkins stood at the back, his calloused fingers fidgeting with the collar of his army jacket. The fabric was clean but showed its age, just like the man who wore it. His daughter Hannah pressed close to his side, her sketchbook hugged tightly to her chest like a shield. "You okay, kiddo?" Jack's voice was soft, meant only for her ears. Hannah nodded, her brown ponytail bouncing slightly. "Are you okay, Dad?" She looked up at him with knowing eyes that sometimes seemed older than her 12 years. Jack managed a small smile. "Just a little nervous, that's all." He ran his hand over the pocket where he kept Theo's medal, a gesture that had become almost unconscious over the years. The library's community room filled steadily. Jack recognized many faces, neighbors, fellow veterans, parents from Hannah's school. Some nodded in his direction. Others simply found their seats. The familiar smell of coffee wafted from a table near the door where volunteers had set up refreshments. Miss Chen, the head librarian, bustled over to them, her reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. "Jack, Hannah, so glad you could make it." She squeezed Hannah's shoulder. "I've saved seats in the front for both of you." Hannah's grip on her sketchbook tightened. "Can I sit in the back instead, please?" Jack exchanged a look with Miss Chen. "Sure thing, sweetheart. How about that corner spot by the window? You'll have good light for drawing." Relief flooded Hannah's face. She hurried to claim the seat, already pulling colored pencils from her bag. Jack watched her settle in, remembering how many times she'd found comfort in her art when words failed her. More people filtered in, filling the rows of chairs. Jack noticed a few uniforms scattered throughout the crowd. Police officers, firefighters, even a couple of active-duty soldiers in their dress blues. Veterans Day always brought out a mixed crowd. 5 minutes, Miss Chen whispered, touching his arm lightly. Jack nodded, his throat suddenly dry. He made his way to the small podium at the front, careful not to make eye contact with anyone. The medal in his pocket felt heavier with each step. From her corner, Hannah had already started sketching. Jack caught glimpses of her pencil moving across the paper in swift, sure strokes. She always said she could think better when she was drawing. Miss Chen tapped the microphone, causing a brief squeal of feedback. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our Veterans Day speaker series." She paused, scanning the room. "Tonight, we're honored to have Jack Hawkins sharing his story with us. Jack has lived in our community for the past 8 years, working as a handyman and raising his daughter Hannah. But before that, he served our country with distinction." Jack's hands gripped the edges of the podium. He hadn't prepared any notes. How could he? The story he needed to tell was etched into his heart, branded there by fire and loss and a promise he still hadn't fully kept. "Many of you know Jack," Ms. Chen continued, "but few know about his service or about the Silver Star that was awarded for actions during his final deployment." She turned to him with a warm smile. "Jack?" The room fell silent as he stepped up to the microphone. Jack cleared his throat, his eyes automatically finding Hannah in her corner. She looked up from her drawing and gave him a small thumbs up. "Thank you for coming tonight," he began, his voice rougher than usual. "I'm not much for public speaking, but some stories need to be told." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "This isn't really my story, though. It belongs to a better man than me. His name was Theodore Washington. Theo to his friends." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Jack reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the cool metal of the Silver Star. He didn't take it out yet. That would come later. "I met Theo during my 3rd deployment. He was fresh out of basic, full of energy and optimism that some of us old-timers had lost along the way. Jack's voice grew steadier as he spoke, drawing strength from the memory of his friend's smile. He had this way of lifting everyone's spirits, even on the worst days. Called his mama every chance he got, sent half his pay home to help with his little sister's college fund. In the back corner, Hannah's pencil moved faster across her paper. Jack knew she was probably drawing Theo, though she'd never met him. He'd described him so many times over the years that she could sketch him from memory. His broad shoulders, his easy grin, the way he wore his patrol cap slightly tilted. We were serving together in Afghanistan, running convoy security missions. Jack's hands tightened on the podium again. The day everything changed started like any other, hot, dusty, routine, until it wasn't. The audience leaned forward in their chairs, drawn in by the quiet intensity in his voice. Even the usual shuffling and coughing had stopped. In her corner, Hannah had paused her drawing, her pencil hovering above the paper. Our MRAP. That's a mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle, Jack explained, his voice beginning to tremble slightly. It hit an IED. The blast. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to continue. The blast flipped us onto our side, and then the shooting started. Through the window behind Hannah, the last rays of sunlight painted the room in shades of gold and amber. Jack focused on that warm light as he prepared to tell the hardest part of the story. How Theo had dragged him from the burning vehicle. How he'd pressed the silver star into Jack's hand with his final breath. And how he'd made Jack promise to bring it to his mother when the time was right. The room held its breath as Jack's voice grew softer, each word carrying the weight of memory.
The blast knocked me out for a few seconds. When I came to, smoke was filling the cabin.
My leg was pinned under twisted metal, and flames were starting to lick at the engine compartment. He paused, his hands gripping the podium so tight his knuckles turned white. Hannah had stopped drawing entirely now, her eyes fixed on her father. That's when Theo acted. He was the youngest in our unit, but he moved like he'd been training for this moment his whole life. Jack's voice steadied as he continued, finding strength in honoring his friend's memory. He crawled through that smoke, ignored the bullets pinging off what was left of our armor. He got to me and said, "I'll never forget it," he said. "Not leaving you behind, Hawk. Your little girl needs her daddy." A few veterans in the audience nodded solemnly, understanding the bond that forms between soldiers. Miss Chin dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The metal that trapped my leg, it was heavy, burning hot from the explosion. Theo somehow got leverage, lifted it just enough. Pain shot through my leg as he pulled me free. Jack closed his eyes briefly, the memory vivid behind his eyelids. The whole time, enemy fire was getting closer. We could hear the rounds hitting the vehicle. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, but otherwise, the room was completely silent. Even the usual shuffle of feet had stopped. Theo got me to the rear hatch. The mechanism was jammed, but he put his shoulder into it, forced it open. That's when Jack's voice caught. He took a deep breath. That's when the first round caught him. Hit him in the side, but he didn't stop. He practically carried me out, got me clear of the vehicle. Jack's hand moved to his pocket, touching the metal through the fabric of his jacket. We made it about 20 yards before the second round hit him. He went down, but he was still trying to drag me to cover. I told him to stop, to save himself, but he just smiled at me, said, "Already did what I came to do, Hawk." Hannah's pencil had fallen from her hand, rolling unnoticed across her sketchbook. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks. The rest of our unit was returning fire, keeping the enemy back. The medic was running toward us, but Jack swallowed hard. But we both knew it was too late. Theo reached into his pocket, pulled out his silver star. He'd received it 2 months earlier for saving 3 civilians during a firefight. Jack finally withdrew the metal from his pocket, holding it up so it caught the light. The silver surface gleamed, well polished, but showing small scratches from years of being carried. He pressed it into my palm. His hands were already growing cold, but his grip was still strong. Jack's voice dropped to barely more than a whisper, but in the silent room, every word carried. He said, "Take this to my mama when the time is right. Tell her I did what she taught me, looked out for others first. Tell her I wasn't scared." A veteran in the third row removed his cap, holding it over his heart. Others followed suit. Those were his last words. He was gone before the medic reached us. Jack stared down at the metal in his hand. I've carried this with me every day since then. Kept telling myself I wasn't worthy to take it to his mother. That I needed to be a better man first, someone deserving of being saved by Theo's sacrifice. The autumn darkness had deepened outside the windows, making the library feel more intimate, like a sanctuary holding this shared moment of grief and remembrance. Theo was 22 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him, had plans to go to college on the GI Bill, wanted to become a teacher. Jack's voice grew rough with emotion. Instead, he gave it all up to save a broken-down sergeant who couldn't even protect his own squad. In the back of the room, unnoticed by the crowd, a elegantly dressed woman pressed a handkerchief to her eyes. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her clothes obviously expensive, but her shoulders shook with silent sobs as she listened. I've spent 8 years trying to live up to what Theo did that night, trying to be the kind of man who deserves a second chance bought at such a price. Jack looked down at the medal one last time before returning it to his pocket. I'm still not sure I'll ever be worthy of it. The room remained absolutely still. Some people wiped tears from their faces. Others sat with heads bowed. In her corner, Hannah hugged her sketchbook to her chest, her face wet with tears. At the back of the room, Eleanor Whitmore dabbed at her eyes with her silk handkerchief, her carefully applied makeup smudged by the tracks of her tears. Jack stood at the podium, head lowered, the weight of memory and unworthiness heavy on his shoulders. The silence in the room felt like a prayer, a collective holding of breath in honor of a young soldier's ultimate sacrifice. The applause finally faded, leaving Jack's ears ringing in the sudden quiet. He tugged at his collar, unused to being the center of attention. Around him, people were starting to gather their things, their murmurs filling the library's community room with a gentle buzz. That was amazing, Dad, Hannah whispered, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. Her eyes shone with pride as she helped collect their belongings from the front row. Jack managed a small smile, though his hand still trembled slightly from sharing such personal memories.
Thanks, sweetheart. Ready to head home?
Hannah nodded, but before they could make their way to the exit, a woman's voice called out softly behind them. Mr. Hawkins? Jack turned to find himself face to face with an elegant woman in her early 60s. Her silver-streaked hair was swept back in a neat chignon, and her blue eyes held a warmth that seemed to reach right through his usual defenses. Something about her bearing suggested both authority and genuine kindness. I'm Eleanor, she said, extending her hand. I wanted to thank you personally for sharing your story tonight. Jack shook her hand, noting her firm but gentle grip. Ma'am, I should be thanking whoever organized this event. It means a lot to give veterans a platform to— Actually, Eleanor interrupted with a slight smile. That's partly why I wanted to speak with you. She glanced around the now emptying room and lowered her voice. I was the anonymous donor who funded tonight's program. Jack blinked in surprise. He'd assumed some big corporation had sponsored the event. This woman didn't have the usual corporate polish he'd come to expect from donors. There was something more genuine about her presence. Hannah peeked out from behind her father's arm, curiosity overtaking her usual shyness. Eleanor's face softened as she noticed the young girl. And who might this talented artist be? Eleanor asked, nodding toward the sketchbook Hannah held. I'm Hannah, she replied quietly but with a small smile. I was drawing while Dad spoke. May I see? Eleanor asked, her interest clearly genuine. Hannah hesitated, then carefully opened her sketchbook. Jack watched in amazement as his normally reserved daughter showed Eleanor a rough sketch of him at the podium, complete with details of his old army jacket and the way he'd been holding onto the silver star while speaking. This is remarkable, Eleanor said, studying the drawing. You've captured so much emotion in just a few lines. Hannah's cheeks flushed pink at the praise, and she unconsciously stood a little straighter. Mr. Hawkins, Eleanor continued, turning back to Jack, your story tonight, it woke something in me I thought I'd lost long ago. Faith, perhaps, or hope. She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. When you spoke about Theo's sacrifice, about carrying that medal all these years, it reminded me that true courage isn't about grand gestures. It's about those quiet moments of choosing what's right, even when it costs us everything. Jack found himself nodding, struck by how perfectly she'd understood what he'd been trying to convey. That's exactly what Theo was like. Never wanted recognition, just did what needed doing. Dad's the same way, Hannah added softly, making Jack's ears turn red. Eleanor smiled at them both, then reached into her handbag and pulled out a business card. "I'd very much like to continue this conversation, Mr. Hawkins. Perhaps you and Hannah would be interested in visiting the military history wing at our local museum. I help fund some of their veteran programs there." Jack accepted the card, noting the simple but elegant design. "That's very kind of you, ma'am." "Please call me Eleanor," she insisted. "And it's not kindness, it's recognition of something important. Something I think we could all learn from." The library staff were starting to stack chairs now, a gentle hint that it was time to wrap up. Jack tucked the card into his pocket, suddenly aware of how late it was getting. "We should probably head home," he said, placing a gentle hand on Hannah's shoulder. "Hannah has school tomorrow." Eleanor nodded in understanding.
Of course. Please, think about the museum. My number's on the card. And Mr. Hawkins?
She met his eyes directly. "Thank you again for reminding me what real integrity looks like." As Jack guided Hannah toward the exit, he found himself glancing back once. Eleanor stood where they'd left her, a thoughtful expression on her face as she watched them go. Outside, the night air was cool and crisp. Jack helped Hannah into their old pickup truck, his mind still processing the unexpected encounter. The business card seemed to burn in his pocket, not with pressure or obligation, but with possibility. In her parked limousine across the street, Eleanor settled into the leather seat and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she found herself whispering words she'd long forgotten. "Lord, if you're still listening, thank you for showing me there's still good in this world. Help me remember how to believe again." The driver waited patiently as Eleanor collected herself, her whispered prayer fading into the quiet night. The afternoon sun streamed through the museum's tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Jack adjusted his collar, feeling slightly out of place among the pristine displays and carefully curated exhibits. Hannah walked beside him, her eyes wide as she took in the military artifacts and historical photographs lining the walls. Eleanor led them through the exhibits with practiced ease, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She traded yesterday's formal attire for a simple navy blazer and slacks, but she carried herself with the same quiet dignity. Most of these items were donated by local veterans and their families, Eleanor explained, gesturing to a display case filled with medals and photographs. Each one tells a story of service and sacrifice. Hannah pressed her nose against the glass, studying a faded black and white photograph of young soldiers. "Dad, they look just like you in your old pictures." Jack smiled, touching the spot where his own service photos sat in his wallet. "Different war, sweetheart, but same spirit." They continued through the exhibits, Eleanor occasionally sharing details about specific artifacts or the veterans who had donated them. Jack noticed how she spoke about each item with genuine reverence, not the rehearsed tone of a typical tour guide. "There's something special I'd like to show you," Eleanor said, leading them toward a newer section of the museum. "It's just around this corner." As they turned, Jack stopped abruptly. Before them stood a massive display featuring a partially reconstructed MRAP vehicle, the same model that had saved his life that night in the desert. The familiar angular armor and reinforced windows brought a rush of memories. "This," Jack's voice caught slightly. "We called these our guardian angels." Eleanor nodded, moving closer to the display. "Mine-protected ambush-resistant vehicle," she said softly. "Whitmore Industries manufactured the armor plating for this model." She paused, watching Jack's reaction carefully. "My late husband's company." Jack turned to her, understanding dawning in his eyes. Hannah looked between them, sensing the weight of the moment. "Your husband's company." Jack trailed off, his hand unconsciously moving to touch the vehicle's armored side. "Yes," Eleanor confirmed. "The same armor that protected your unit that night." She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "When I heard your story yesterday about Theo and the medal, I couldn't help but think about the connection. How sometimes the threads of our lives weave together in ways we never expect." Jack ran his fingers along the cool metal, lost in thought. Hannah had moved to a nearby bench and pulled out her sketchbook, her pencil already moving across the page. "This technology," Eleanor continued, "it was meant to protect, to save lives. But after Richard, my husband, passed away, I struggled with the company's direction. The board was more interested in profit margins than purpose." She moved to stand beside Jack, both of them facing the imposing vehicle. "That's partly why I stepped back from active management, started focusing on philanthropy instead. trying to find ways to honor the real purpose behind what we built. Jack nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes the hardest part is figuring out how to use what we've been given to do some good in the world. Exactly, Eleanor said, brightening. Which is why I wanted to talk to you about an idea. She gestured toward a nearby seating area. Shall we? They settled onto the comfortable benches, Hannah still sketching nearby, but clearly listening. Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her expression earnest. During your speech yesterday, you mentioned something about wanting to help other veterans transition back to civilian life. And Hannah told me you make the best coffee in town. Jack chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Just a dream I've kicked around. A coffee truck, maybe. Something simple where vets could work, connect with the community, maybe mentor some kids too. I'd like to help make that dream a reality, Eleanor said simply. Jack stared at her, caught off guard. Ma'am, Eleanor, that's very generous, but it's not charity, she interrupted gently. It's an investment in people who deserve a chance to serve their community in a new way. She pulled a folder from her bag, opening it to reveal some preliminary sketches. I've had some initial plans drawn up, just rough ideas. But with your experience and vision, we could create something truly meaningful. Hannah had crept closer, her eyes wide as she looked at the drawings. Dad, look! They even included a little art corner like we talked about. Jack studied the plans, his expression a mix of hope and hesitation. The sketches showed exactly what he'd imagined, a welcoming space that could serve both veterans and the community. But years of struggling had taught him to be cautious about opportunities that seemed too good to be true. This is incredible, he admitted. But it's a big undertaking. I wouldn't want to risk... Dad, Hannah interrupted softly, placing her hand on his arm. Her eyes shone with a hope he hadn't seen since before her mother passed. Remember what you always tell me? About how Theo said sometimes the bravest thing is letting people help? Jack's breath caught in his throat. He looked at his daughter, then at Eleanor, who waited patiently with understanding in her eyes. You're right, sweetheart, he said finally. He turned to Eleanor, squaring his shoulders. If you're serious about this. I am, Eleanor assured him. Then yes, Jack said, a smile breaking across his face. Yes, I think we should try. Hannah beamed, hugging her father tightly. Eleanor watched them with quiet joy, already seeing the possibilities unfold. The afternoon sun continued to stream through the windows, illuminating the three of them as they began to discuss the details of turning a dream into reality. The morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of Lou's diner, casting a warm glow over the worn red vinyl booths. Jack sat in his usual corner spot, waiting for his coffee while Hannah sketched in her notebook across from him. The familiar scent of bacon and maple syrup filled the air, mixing with the quiet murmur of early morning conversations. Here's your usual, Jack, Betty, the veteran waitress, said. But instead of setting down his coffee, she hesitated, clutching a folded newspaper to her chest. You might want to see this first. Jack's stomach dropped at her concerned expression. She placed the local paper in front of him, and his coffee sloshed slightly as his hand jerked in surprise. There, splashed across the front page, was a photo of him and Eleanor walking side by side at the museum. The headline screamed in bold letters, Veteran Single Dad shares war medal story, Billionaire, Widow falls hard. Hannah looked up from her drawing, her pencil freezing mid-stroke. Dad, what's wrong? Jack's face burned as he scanned the article. Someone had snapped photos of their museum visit, Eleanor pointing out exhibits, their heads bent close together in conversation, even Hannah showing Eleanor her sketches. The story painted their simple afternoon as some kind of fairy tale romance. It's nothing, sweetie, he managed, but Hannah was already reaching for the paper. His phone buzzed in his pocket, text messages from his veteran buddies. Saw the paper, you sly dog. Moving up in the world, Hawk. Since when do you date billionaires? The bell above the diner door chimed, and Jack looked up to see three elderly regulars entering. They spotted him immediately, their eyebrows raising in recognition. One elbowed another, whispering not quite quietly enough. That's him, the veteran from the paper. Jack slumped lower in his booth, wishing he could disappear into the cracked vinyl. Hannah's face had gone pink as she read the article, her lower lip trembling slightly. Dad, they're saying Mrs. Whitmore likes you. Likes you. It's just gossip, Hannah. Newspapers need to sell copies. But even as he said it, He remembered the warmth in Eleanor's eyes, the way her hand had briefly touched his arm as she described her vision for the coffee truck project. Betty returned with his coffee, her expression sympathetic. "Don't let it get to you, Jack. This town's been desperate for some good news. A handsome veteran and a kind-hearted widow? It's like something from those romance novels I definitely don't read on my breaks." Jack managed a weak smile, but his mind was racing. What would Eleanor think? Would she regret offering to help with the coffee truck? Would this attention hurt her reputation? His phone buzzed again, this time with an unknown number. He answered hesitantly. "Mr. Hawkins?" A clipped professional voice. "This is Paige Chen from the Herald. I was hoping to get your comment on your relationship with Eleanor Whitmore." "No comment," Jack said firmly, ending the call. It immediately buzzed again with another unknown number. Hannah's eyes were wide with worry. "Maybe we should call Mrs. Whitmore?" Before Jack could respond, the diner's ancient TV flickered to life as Lou turned up the volume. A local morning show host was holding up the newspaper, grinning broadly. "Breaking news this morning as our town's own Eleanor Whitmore appears to have found love. The wealthy philanthropist was spotted yesterday with local veteran Jack Hawkins." Jack dropped enough cash on the table to cover their breakfast and stood abruptly. "Come on, Hannah. We need to go." Outside, more people were staring. A woman with a smartphone raised it as they passed, clearly taking a photo. Jack put his arm around Hannah's shoulders, guiding her quickly to their truck. His phone buzzed yet again. This time, it was Eleanor. "Jack, I'm so sorry about this," she said, her voice strained. "I never meant. I should have known we'd be photographed. The board members are furious. They're saying I'm being reckless with the foundation's image." In the background, he could hear another phone ringing. Eleanor sighed. "That's another board call. Jack, It's okay," he cut in, hearing the stress in her voice. "You don't have to explain. This was probably a mistake anyway. I'm not." "This isn't the kind of attention Hannah and I need." There was a pause. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice was smaller. "I understand. Perhaps it would be best if we—" "Yeah," Jack said, unable to finish the sentence himself. "I think so." After hanging up, he sat in the truck for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel. Hannah touched his arm gently. "Dad, are we really not going to see Mrs. Whitmore anymore?" Jack started the engine, trying to ignore the ache in his chest. "It's complicated, sweetie. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices to protect the people they care about. But she was nice, and she believed in your coffee truck idea. And," Hannah's voice quavered, "I liked how you smiled when she was around." Jack swallowed hard, watching another person walk past their truck, phone raised. "I know, Hannah. I liked it too. But sometimes what we like isn't what's best." His phone buzzed again, probably another reporter. Jack turned it off completely and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving behind the diner where he'd started so many normal, quiet mornings. But nothing about their lives felt normal or quiet anymore. As they drove home, Hannah opened her sketchbook and slowly tore out the drawing she'd been working on, a detailed sketch of a coffee truck with Eleanor, Jack, and herself standing proudly in front of it. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket without saying a word. The rhythmic hum of the lawnmower filled the early evening air as Jack pushed it in neat rows across Gloria Shepherd's modest front yard. Sweat dampened his gray t-shirt, despite the cooling September breeze. The Silver Star medal weighed heavy in his pocket, as it had for years, a constant reminder of promises yet unfulfilled. Gloria's white clapboard house stood dignified but aging, its paint peeling in places. Jack had been mowing her lawn for free ever since Theo's passing, a small gesture that felt pathetically inadequate compared to the debt he owed her. Through the window, he caught glimpses of her moving about inside, probably preparing her evening tea. The metal pressed against his thigh with each step. Maybe today was the day. Maybe after the mowing, he'd finally walk up those 3 concrete steps, knock on her door, and, "Mr. Hawkins?" Jack killed the mower's engine. A woman in her mid-30s stood at the edge of the property, notepad in hand. Her press badge read, "Paige Nunez, Valley Chronicle." "I'm not doing interviews," Jack said firmly, wiping his brow with his sleeve. "Already got enough attention from that headline this morning." Paige held up her hands. "I'm not here about the museum photo or Eleanor Whitmore. Well, not directly." She pulled out a manila folder. I'm investigating something else. Did you know Whitmore Industries faced several lawsuits around the time of Theodore Shepard's death? Jack's jaw tightened. Ma'am, I'm trying to finish this lawn before dark. The lawsuits were sealed, Page continued, undeterred. But they involved allegations about armor testing on military vehicles. The same product line as— Stop. Jack's voice came out harder than intended. He glanced anxiously at Gloria's window. Whatever you're implying, I don't want to hear it. Not here. Not in front of his mother's house. Mr. Hawkins, people deserve to know if corners were cut, if soldiers died because— Ms. Nunez, Jack interrupted, his tone measured but firm. I respect what reporters do, but right now you're standing on private property, trying to turn a good woman's grief into a headline. Please leave. Page studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. She tucked her folder away but left a business card on the fence post. When you're ready to talk about what really happened that night, call me. The truth matters, Mr. Hawkins. Jack waited until she was gone before reaching into his pocket, fingers closing around the familiar edges of the silver star. The metal that should have been Theo's. The metal that belonged in Gloria's hands, not his. But now, with questions swirling about Whitmore Industries, about Eleanor's company, the timing felt wrong again. He finished mowing in the growing dusk, his movements mechanical. When the lawn was done, he stood at the bottom of Gloria's steps, the metal burning in his pocket. Through the window, he could see her silhouette, alone with her evening prayers. His hand moved toward his pocket, then dropped away. Not tonight. Not with these new doubts clouding everything. Jack packed up his mower and walked home in the gathering darkness, the weight of the metal and unspoken truths heavy in his steps. Across town, in her sprawling Victorian mansion, Eleanor Whitmore sat alone in her study. The antique desk lamp cast a soft glow over her tablet screen as she scrolled through a series of increasingly hostile emails from Marcus Vail, the company's CFO. The board expects you to maintain appropriate social distance from publicity stunts, one read. Your husband built this company on discretion and professionalism. Another was more direct. Eleanor, this veteran charity case is beneath your position. End it now before you damage the Whitmore name irreparably. The latest had arrived just minutes ago. Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. No excuses. We need to discuss damage control. Eleanor set the tablet down, her fingers trembling slightly. The house felt too big, too empty, filled with memories of compromise and silence. She'd spent years playing the proper corporate widow, nodding at the right moments, signing the right papers. But Jack's story had awakened something in her, something that made Marcus's threats feel hollow for the first time. She picked up her phone, wanting to call Jack, to explain about the board's pressure. But what could she say? That she was scared of her own company? That for the first time in years, she felt alive but also terrified? Instead, she sat in the growing darkness, watching the garden lights flicker on automatically, illuminating paths through her manicured but lonely estate. Somewhere across town, she knew Jack was probably helping Hannah with homework, living an authentic life she'd forgotten how to live. More emails arrived, but Eleanor didn't open them. She'd spent too many years reading between corporate lines, trying to find truth in carefully crafted phrases. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but tonight, she let herself remember the simple honesty in Jack's voice as he'd told Theo's story, and the way her heart had recognized something real after so long in the shadows. Marcus's warnings glowed unread on her screen, their threats diminishing against the memory of Hannah's shy smile and Jack's quiet strength. Eleanor closed her eyes, whispering the prayer that had become her anchor since that night at the library. God, if truth hurts, I still want it. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of First Grace Church, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Jack stood at the entrance, his hand hovering near the small of Eleanor's back but not quite touching it. Hannah bounced ahead of them, her Sunday dress swishing as she moved. The usual pre-service chatter died down as heads turned their way. Jack felt his jaw tighten, but kept his expression neutral. Eleanor stood tall beside him, though he noticed her fingers fidgeting with her simple pearl necklace. Mrs. Peterson, who'd brought casseroles after Theo's passing, smiled warmly and waved them over. But behind her, Jack caught Mr. Wilson, head of the church finance committee, whispering to his wife with narrowed eyes. The whispers spread like ripples in a pond. "Jack! Eleanor!" Pastor Ruth's warm voice cut through the tension. She moved toward them with purpose, her gray curls bouncing and her colorful dress marking her as anything but a traditional minister.
"I'm so glad you both made it today."
The genuine welcome in her voice made Jack's shoulders relax slightly. Hannah darted forward to hug the pastor, who laughed and produced a butterscotch candy from her pocket. "The usual spot?" Pastor Ruth gestured to Jack's regular pew, third row from the back on the right side. It had been his and Hannah's spot since they'd started attending 3 years ago. Eleanor hesitated. "Perhaps I should." "Nonsense," Pastor Ruth said firmly but kindly. "Family sits together." She gave them both a meaningful look that brooked no argument. As they settled into the pew, Jack noticed more reactions around them. Tom Martinez, a fellow veteran, gave him a subtle thumbs up, but the Wilsons in their social circle huddled together, shooting disapproving glances their way. Eleanor's wealth and status clearly made some uncomfortable in their small-town church. Hannah seemed oblivious to the drama, already pulling out her children's Bible and settling between them. She leaned against Eleanor's arm as she flipped through the pages, and Jack saw Eleanor's eyes grow misty at the simple gesture of acceptance. The organ music started, and the congregation rose for the first hymn. Jack wasn't much of a singer, but he knew Eleanor had once been in the church choir years ago. Her clear soprano rose beside him, slightly hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Hannah joined in with the enthusiastic off-key singing of a child. During the Lord's Prayer, Jack felt Eleanor's hand trembling slightly as she clasped his. He squeezed gently, hoping to convey support. When he opened his eyes, he caught Pastor Ruth watching them with approval as she continued leading the prayer. The sermon focused on grace and judgment, and Jack wondered if Pastor Ruth had chosen the topic specifically for today. She spoke about how quick people were to judge others without knowing their full story, and how God's grace was bigger than human prejudices. "We're called to love," Pastor Ruth said, making eye contact with various members of the congregation. "Not to whisper, not to assume, not to exclude, but to love." During the passing of the peace, several church members made a point of coming to greet them. Mrs. Martinez hugged Eleanor warmly while her husband chatted with Jack about the coffee truck plans. But others pointedly stayed away, creating a subtle but noticeable divide in the congregation. After the service, they lingered in the narthex. Eleanor knelt down to admire Hannah's latest drawing of what appeared to be 3 stick figures holding hands near a truck. "That's Daddy's coffee truck," Hannah explained proudly. "And that's you helping, and that's me doing homework inside it." Eleanor's eyes softened as she studied the crayon artwork. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Would you draw another one for my office?" Before Hannah could answer, they overheard a sharp whisper from nearby. "Well, I never." Using a child to get closer to his wealthy target. Jack felt his face flush with anger, but Eleanor touched his arm gently. "Not here," she murmured. "Not now." Pastor Ruth appeared suddenly beside the gossiper, speaking in a voice that carried just far enough. "Mary Wilson, I believe the coffee hour needs more help in the kitchen. Would you be so kind?" The woman hurried away, properly chastised. Pastor Ruth turned to Jack and Eleanor with a warm smile. "You know, the church nursery could use some fresh paint. I was thinking of organizing a volunteer day." "I'd be happy to help," Jack said immediately, grateful for her subtle support. "And I could provide supplies," Eleanor added, then caught herself. "That is, if it wouldn't cause more talk." "Let them talk," Pastor Ruth said firmly. "Actions speak louder than words, and I see nothing but good actions here." As they prepared to leave, Hannah spotted her friend Katie and ran to say hello, leaving Jack and Eleanor momentarily alone. Eleanor's composed facade cracked slightly. "I'm sorry if I've made things difficult for you here," she whispered. "This is your church home. I shouldn't have—" "Stop," Jack said quietly but firmly. He guided her toward the door, nodding politely to people as they passed. The morning sun was bright as they stepped outside, and he walked her to her car, parked discreetly around the corner. Eleanor paused beside the vehicle, her hand resting on the door handle. "Maybe we should be more careful, more private about." Jack shook his head, his voice gentle but determined. "They'll talk either way. I'd rather give them something worth talking about." Eleanor smiled with tears in her eyes. Paige Nunez's cramped apartment buzzed with the hum of her ancient laptop. Coffee cups littered her desk, evidence of another sleepless night chasing leads. Her inbox pinged with a new message from an anonymous sender. Whitmore Industries. Armor testing records. Her hands trembled slightly as she downloaded the attachments. Years of reporting had taught her that anonymous sources often held the biggest stories. As the files opened, her eyes widened. Internal memos, test results, and email chains filled her screen. "Oh my God," she whispered, scrolling through document after document. The technical language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out: expedited testing protocol, acceptable margin of error, and quarterly targets. The morning light was harsh when Paige finally looked up from her computer. She grabbed her worn leather messenger bag and headed for her car. She needed to talk to Jack. The drive to Jack's modest ranch house took 20 minutes. His old pickup truck sat in the gravel driveway, hood up. Tools were scattered around it. He was probably doing repairs again. Paige took a deep breath and stepped out of her car. Jack slid out from under the truck, wiping his hands on a rag. "Morning, Paige," he said, his voice friendly but guarded. He'd grown wary of reporters since the viral headline. "Jack, we need to talk," Paige said, pulling her tablet from her bag. "It's about Whitmore Industries." His expression shifted, concern creeping into his eyes. "Hannah's inside drawing. Let's sit on the porch." They settled into the weathered wooden chairs. The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass from next door. Jack's coffee mug sat on the small table between them, half empty and probably cold. "I received some documents this morning," Paige began, her voice gentle but firm. "They suggest that around the time of the incident with Theo, Whitmore Industries may have cut corners on armor testing." Jack's hands gripped the arms of his chair. "What kind of corners?" "According to these memos, the CFO, Marcus Vale, pushed through an accelerated testing schedule to meet financial targets." Paige showed him the tablet screen. "They skipped some of the standard impact tests." Jack's face remained carefully neutral, but Paige noticed his jaw clenching. "The same armor series that was on our vehicle that night?" "Yes, and there's more." Paige swiped to another document. "Eleanor's name appears on some approval documents." The color drained from Jack's face. He stood up abruptly, pacing the small porch. "She would have told me if she knew," he said. But uncertainty crept into his voice. "The signature is on a quarterly review packet," Paige explained. "It's possible she didn't know the details. These companies often bury important information in massive document dumps." Jack leaned against the porch railing, looking out at nothing in particular. "I need to see everything you have." They spent the next hour going through the files. Jack asked careful, detailed questions about dates and specifications. His military training showed in how methodically he processed the information. The screen door creaked, and Hannah stepped out onto the porch. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and graphite smudges marked her fingers from drawing. "Daddy?" she asked, looking between Jack and Paige. "Is everything okay?" Jack's expression softened immediately. "Come here, sweetheart." He pulled her into a gentle hug. "You look worried," Hannah said, showing the perceptiveness that sometimes made Jack's heart ache. "Is it about Miss Eleanor? I heard you talking." Paige gathered her things quietly, knowing this was a private moment. "I'll send you copies of everything, Jack. Take your time with it." After Paige's car disappeared down the street, Jack sat with Hannah on the porch swing. The gentle creaking filled the silence as he tried to find the right words. "You remember how I told you about Theo?" Jack asked softly. "About how brave he was that night." Hannah nodded. "He saved you, and gave you his medal to give to his mama someday." "That's right." Jack's voice was thick with emotion. "Well, we just found out that maybe the people who made our truck didn't do everything right. They might have rushed some important safety checks." Hannah's brow furrowed as she processed this. "But Miss Eleanor makes you smile. She helps people." "She does," Jack agreed, thinking of Eleanor's genuine warmth, her desire to make things right. "But sometimes good people can be part of something bad without knowing it." Hannah was quiet for a moment, picking at a loose thread on her shirt. Then she looked up at Jack with those eyes that seemed far too wise for her 12 years. "Daddy, does this mean Miss Eleanor hurt Theo?" Jack's heart felt heavy in his chest. The morning sun cast long shadows across the porch as he held his daughter close. "I don't know yet, sweetheart." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Jack's modest front porch as Eleanor's sleek car pulled into the gravel driveway. Hannah pressed her face against the living room window, her sketchbook clutched tight against her chest. "She's here, Dad." Hannah bounced on her toes, her excitement lighting up the small room. Jack smoothed his clean work shirt and ran a hand through his gray-streaked hair. The house suddenly felt too small, too worn. The coffee table had a water ring, and yesterday's newspaper lay scattered near his favorite armchair. But Eleanor's warm smile as she stepped out of her car made all those worries fade. "I brought snacks," Eleanor called out, holding up a brown paper bag. "I hope chocolate chip cookies are still your favorite, Hannah?" Hannah threw open the screen door, letting it bang against the frame. "You remembered." Jack winced at the noise, but couldn't help smiling as his daughter hugged Eleanor. The elegant woman didn't seem to mind that Hannah's pencil-smudged hands left gray marks on her cream-colored blouse. "Come in, please." Jack held the door. "Sorry about the mess. We weren't exactly expecting company today." Eleanor stepped inside, her eyes taking in the cozy living room with its mismatched furniture and family photos. "This isn't mess, Jack. This is a home." Hannah cleared space on the coffee table, spreading out her sketchbook and colored pencils. "Miss Eleanor, I've been drawing ideas for the truck. Want to see?" "I'd love to." Eleanor sat on the worn sofa, smoothing her skirt. She placed the cookies on a chipped plate Jack hurried to provide. Jack settled into his armchair, watching as Hannah showed Eleanor page after page of truck designs. His daughter had spent hours getting the details right. Everything from the service window placement to the patriotic bunting along the top. "Look here," Hannah pointed to her latest sketch. "We could have a special window just for kids, lower down so they can reach. And maybe a little step stool for the really little ones?" Eleanor leaned closer, genuine interest brightening her face. "That's brilliant, Hannah. And what's this area here?" "That's where veterans can sit and talk while they drink their coffee. Dad says sometimes they just need a quiet place to be together." Jack's throat tightened. He'd mentioned that once, weeks ago, and Hannah had remembered. Eleanor reached into her leather bag and pulled out a folder. "Actually, that's partly why I came today. I've been thinking about the truck project, and I believe we can do even more." She spread several documents on the table, careful not to disturb Hannah's drawings. "These are some initial proposals. We could start with one truck, yes, but what if we plan for expansion? A small fleet, perhaps, each one staffed by veterans, offering not just coffee, but community." Jack leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Eleanor, that's too much. The cost alone is something I can easily manage," Eleanor cut in gently. "Jack, money isn't the issue here. What you're offering, what Theo's memory represents, that's priceless." Hannah had gone quiet, her pencil moving across a fresh page as the adults talked. "I've seen how this town responds to you, Jack," Eleanor continued. "The respect you've earned, the way other veterans look to you. This could be more than just a coffee truck. It could be a mission." Jack stood and paced to the window, looking out at his small yard where he and Hannah had planted sunflowers last spring. "I never wanted to be a mission. I just wanted—" He trailed off, uncertain how to express the weight of his dreams. "You wanted to honor Theo," Eleanor finished softly, "and provide for Hannah. Why can't we do all of that?" Hannah looked up from her drawing. "Dad, come see what I made." Jack moved back to the coffee table. There, in Hannah's careful strokes, was a new sketch. The coffee truck stood proud and gleaming, with Theo's table written in bold letters across the side. But it was the figures in front that made his heart catch himself, Eleanor, and Gloria Shepherd, all standing together and smiling. A family formed through loss and hope. "Oh, Hannah," Eleanor's voice wavered. "It's perfect." Jack couldn't speak for a moment. The simple truth of his daughter's vision, the way she saw past all the complications to what mattered, humbled him. "The thing is," Eleanor said, reaching across to touch Jack's hand, "I believe in this. In you. In what we could build together." Hannah added another careful detail to her drawing, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. The room fell quiet except for the soft scratch of her pencil. Jack looked at Eleanor. Really looked at her. Gone was the careful corporate mask she often wore. Here was just a woman who wanted to do something good, something right, who saw in him not a charity case, but a partner. "Okay," he said finally. "But we do this right. Everything above board, everything honest." Eleanor's smile could have lit up the darkening room. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They spent the next hour going over Eleanor's proposals, with Hannah contributing ideas between bites of chocolate chip cookie. When Eleanor finally had to leave, The coffee table was covered in a mix of legal documents and crayon drawings, coffee rings and cookie crumbs. After Eleanor's car disappeared down the street, Hannah carefully tore out her latest drawing. "Here, Dad, for safekeeping." Jack took the sketch, his fingers gentle on the edges. Hannah had added little details he hadn't noticed before. The silver star pinned to his shirt, the cross necklace Eleanor always wore, the gentle smile on Gloria's face. Without a word, he walked to the bookshelf and pulled out his Bible. The leather was worn soft with use, the pages marked with years of prayers and hopes. He opened it carefully and tucked Hannah's drawing between the pages of Psalms. The town council chamber felt stuffy despite its high ceilings and polished wooden panels. Jack tugged at his tie, the only one he owned, while Hannah smoothed out her Sunday dress beside him. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as council members shuffled papers and tapped their pens. Eleanor sat 3 rows back, her presence both comforting and nerve-wracking. She'd helped Jack prepare his presentation, but this was his moment to stand on his own 2 feet. "Next item on the agenda," announced Mayor Chen, adjusting her glasses. "Permit application for a mobile beverage service, Theo's Table. The applicant is Jack Hawkins." Jack stood, his worn leather folder in hand. The walk to the podium felt longer than any patrol he'd done overseas. He cleared his throat and opened the folder, revealing Hannah's carefully colored sketches alongside the professional blueprints Eleanor's team had drawn up. "Good evening, council members. I'm here to present my plan for a veteran-run coffee truck that will serve our community while providing employment opportunities for local veterans." His voice grew steadier as he spoke. "The truck will also offer mentorship programs for youth, partnering with the library and local schools." Councilman Peterson, known for his designer suits and family's old money, leaned forward with a smirk. "A glorified hobo wagon? Is that really what we want cluttering up our historic downtown?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Jack felt his jaw tighten, but years of military discipline held his tongue. He heard Hannah's small intake of breath behind him. "Sir," Jack replied evenly, "this business will meet all health and safety codes. We've included detailed plans for—" "We've seen enough food trucks come and go," Peterson cut in, waving his hand dismissively. "They attract the wrong element. This isn't exactly the image we're trying to project for our town's future." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Jack caught glimpses of familiar faces. Mike from his support group, Sarah, who'd served as a combat medic, Rodriguez, who still walked with a limp from his tour in Afghanistan. "The element you're referring to, sir," Jack said carefully, "includes men and women who've served this country. They deserve a chance to build something meaningful here at home." Peterson's face reddened. "Now see here, if I may," came a quiet voice from the audience. Eleanor stood, her elegant presence commanding attention. "The financial backing for this venture is fully secured. Every detail meets or exceeds municipal requirements. The only question is whether this council believes in supporting our veterans and youth programs." Paige Nunez shifted in her seat near the front, her camera ready. Her pen flew across her notepad as she captured every word. "With all due respect, Ms. Whitmore," Peterson sneered, "your personal interest in this project shouldn't influence—" A chair scraped against the floor. Mike stood up, his prosthetic leg visible beneath his khakis. Then Sarah rose, her service medals glinting on her blazer. Rodriguez pushed himself up with his cane. One by one, veterans throughout the chamber stood, some in suits, others in work clothes, young and old. A living tapestry of service and sacrifice. Jack felt his throat tighten as he watched more people stand. There was Tommy from the hardware store, still wearing his work apron. Maria from the diner, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. Even old Mr. Jenkins, who'd served in Vietnam, struggled to his feet with help from his grandson. The silence in the chamber grew profound. Hannah slipped her small hand into Jack's, and he squeezed it gently. "The plans," Jack continued, his voice steady and clear, "include designated locations that won't impede traffic or business access. We've already received support letters from 3 local schools interested in our youth program." Mayor Chen leaned forward, studying the room. "Perhaps we should review the actual permit criteria rather than make assumptions about elements." Peterson's face had turned an interesting shade of purple, but he said nothing more. Eleanor made her way forward through the standing veterans, each one nodding to her with respect. She reached Jack's side and took his free hand, her grip warm and sure. The flash of Paige's camera captured the moment. Jack standing tall at the podium, his daughter on one side, Eleanor on the other, and behind them, a room full of veterans standing in silent, powerful solidarity. The chamber fell quiet, except for the soft click of Paige's camera, preserving an image that would speak louder than any words of prejudice or doubt. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Gloria Shepherd's neat white porch. Jack's pickup truck rumbled to a stop in the gravel driveway, and Hannah's eyes went wide at the perfectly tended roses lining the walkway. She clutched her sketchbook closer to her chest as they approached the house. "Those flowers are pretty," Hannah whispered, staying close to her father's side. Jack nodded, his throat tight. The velvet box containing Theo's silver star felt like it weighed 100 pounds in his jacket pocket. He'd driven past this house countless times, mowed the lawn in quiet penance, but never worked up the courage to knock on the door. Until today. The screen door creaked open before they reached the steps. Gloria Shepherd stood in the doorway, tall and dignified in her navy dress, her silver hair swept back in a neat bun. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, took in every detail of their approach. "Well," Gloria said, her gaze settling on Hannah, "you must be the young artist I've heard about." Her stern expression softened slightly. "I see your sketchbook there. Do you like to draw?" Hannah nodded shyly. "Yes, ma'am. Come on up here, child. I have some lemonade cooling, and there's a plate of sugar cookies that need eating." Gloria's voice was warm as she addressed Hannah, but when her eyes met Jack's, they turned to steel. Jack helped Hannah up the steps, his hand trembling slightly as he steadied her. The porch boards creaked under their feet. Hannah hesitated at the threshold, looking back at her father. "It's all right, sweetheart," Jack said softly. "Mrs. Shepherd and I need to talk about something important." Gloria ushered Hannah inside to the kitchen, returning moments later with 2 glasses of lemonade. She handed one to Jack without a word, then lowered herself into one of the white rocking chairs. Jack remained standing, his free hand unconsciously touching the pocket where the medal lay. "Mrs. Shepherd," he began, his voice rough. "You've been meaning to come for 12 years, Mr. Hawkins," Gloria cut in. Her fingers gripped the armrests of her rocker. "I've watched you mow my lawn every other Sunday since my Theo died, sneaking in like a ghost, never saying a word." Jack's shoulders sagged. "Yes, ma'am. And now here you are, with that medal burning a hole in your pocket." Her voice was quiet but sharp. "Why today, Mr. Hawkins? What makes today different?" From inside the house came the soft sound of Hannah humming, the clink of a glass against the kitchen table. Jack closed his eyes briefly, gathering his courage. "Your son made me promise," he said, "to bring it to you when the time was right." His hand withdrew the velvet box, holding it out. "I've carried it every day since then, waiting to be worthy of delivering it." Gloria's eyes fixed on the box, but she made no move to take it. "And you think you're worthy now?" "No, ma'am," Jack admitted. "I don't think I'll ever be worthy of what Theo did. But Hannah," he glanced toward the kitchen, "she's teaching me that sometimes we have to face our fears, even when we don't feel ready." Gloria's rocking chair creaked as she leaned forward, studying Jack's face. "I hear you're starting some kind of coffee business, with that wealthy widow who's been in the papers." Jack's grip tightened on the metal box. "Yes, ma'am. We're calling it Theo's Table, a place where veterans can work, where kids can get mentoring after school, using my son's name," Gloria said flatly. "To honor him," Jack corrected gently. "To create something good from what happened. Something that might help other lost souls like I was." Gloria stood abruptly, her movement making Jack step back. She walked to the porch railing, gripping it as she stared out at her roses. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of Hannah's pencil scratching against paper. "My son died saving you," Gloria finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "He pressed that medal into your hands and made you promise to bring it to me. And for 12 years, you've carried it around, deciding when I deserved to have this piece of my boy back." Jack felt the words like physical blows. "Mrs. Shepherd, No." Gloria turned, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "That medal stays with you for now, Mr. Hawkins. When you've built something real from my son's sacrifice, when you've truly honored his memory with more than just good intentions, then we'll talk about where that star belongs." From the kitchen came Hannah's voice. "Mrs. Shepherd, would you like to see my drawing?" Gloria's face transformed, warming instantly. "Of course, dear." She moved toward the door, then paused to look back at Jack. "You can see yourself out, Mr. Hawkins. And don't forget to mow on Sunday, the grass is getting long." Jack stood alone on the porch, the metal box heavy in his hands. Through the window, he could see Hannah showing Gloria her sketchbook. The older woman's head bent close to his daughter's, both of them smiling over whatever Hannah had drawn. Quietly, he placed his untouched lemonade on the porch rail and made his way back to his truck. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He waited in the driver's seat, watching as Hannah gathered her things several minutes later and said goodbye to Gloria. As Hannah bounded down the porch steps, Jack saw Gloria pick up the velvet box he'd left behind. Through the screen door, he watched her hold it close to her chest, her lips moving as she looked at Theo's photograph on the wall. "Not yet, my boy." The evening sun filtered through tall windows, casting warm light across Eleanor's dining room. The massive table, usually set for corporate dinners, felt cozier tonight, with just 4 place settings clustered at one end. Hannah sat cross-legged in her chair, carefully arranging her napkin while sneaking glances at the crystal chandelier above. "This ceiling must be a pain to dust," Pastor Ruth remarked, her eyes twinkling as she accepted a bowl of mashed potatoes from Eleanor. Eleanor laughed, a genuine sound that echoed in the high-ceilinged room. "I wouldn't know. But Maria, my housekeeper, certainly has opinions about it." She glanced at Jack, who was studying his plate with careful attention to proper fork placement. "Please, everyone, make yourselves comfortable. This isn't a state dinner." "Could have fooled me," Jack said, finally cracking a smile. "Though I notice you didn't bring out the fancy china." "Oh, that's because Hannah and I are on dish duty later," Eleanor replied, winking at Hannah. "Right, sweetheart?" Hannah beamed, clearly delighted to be included in the plan. "I'm an expert dishwasher. Daddy says I leave everything squeaky clean." "She does," Jack confirmed, relaxing enough to loosen his tie slightly. "Though usually with more water on the floor than in the sink." Pastor Ruth bowed her head briefly. "Shall we say grace?" They joined hands around the table, Hannah's small fingers wrapped trustingly in Eleanor's left hand, while her right found Jack's calloused palm. The touch sent a familiar warmth through her arm. "Dear Lord," Pastor Ruth began, her voice gentle but carrying, "we thank you for this food, this fellowship, and the precious gift of new beginnings. Bless this meal and the hands that prepared it. Help us see your grace in unexpected places. Amen." "Amen," they echoed. As they began passing dishes, Pastor Ruth turned to Eleanor. "Speaking of new beginnings, I noticed you at Wednesday night prayer service last week. First time in a while?" Eleanor paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "That obvious, was it? Only to someone who's been watching that empty pew for 20 years, Pastor Ruth said kindly. "Your mother used to sit there every week." Jack looked up, interested. "I didn't know your mother attended First Methodist." "She did," Eleanor said softly, "until she got sick. Then the treatments took over our Sundays." She took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. "After she passed, Charles, my late husband, he wasn't much for church. Said the stock market was his religion." Her attempt at humor fell flat. Hannah, who had been quietly drawing in her mashed potatoes with her fork, spoke up. "Did your mom like to sing hymns? Daddy says my mom used to sing in choir." A gentle silence fell over the table. Jack reached over to squeeze Hannah's shoulder. "She did," Eleanor answered, her voice warm with memory. "She had a terrible voice, but she sang anyway. Said God cared more about the joy than the tune." Pastor Ruth nodded. "Wise woman. Rather like someone else I know." She gave Eleanor a meaningful look. "It takes courage to come back, you know, to anything. Church, community, love." Jack coughed slightly, suddenly very interested in his green beans. "Sometimes," Eleanor said carefully, "you need a reminder of what matters, of who you really are, beneath all the labels people put on you." "Billionaire widow falls hard," Jack quoted the newspaper headline wryly. "Exactly," Eleanor said, "though I prefer woman rediscovers faith as my headline." Pastor Ruth spread butter on a roll, her movements deliberate. "Faith comes in many forms. Sometimes it's sitting in a pew. Sometimes it's believing in second chances." Hannah looked up from her artistic potato endeavors. "Like Daddy's coffee truck? That's a second chance, right?" "It sure is, sugar," Pastor Ruth agreed. "And speaking of chances, I hear the permit meeting is next week?" Jack nodded, some tension returning to his shoulders. Tuesday morning. Eleanor's lawyers think we have a good shot, especially with the veteran support letters. God works in mysterious ways, Pastor Ruth mused. Sometimes through legal briefs and building permits. They shared a laugh, and the conversation drifted to lighter topics. Hannah told stories about her art class. Pastor Ruth shared gossip about the church bake sale, and even Jack contributed a few funny tales from his handyman jobs. As the meal wound down, Eleanor stood to begin clearing plates. "Hannah, ready for dish duty?" "Actually," Pastor Ruth interrupted smoothly, "I wondered if Hannah might help me organize some Sunday school craft supplies I brought in my car. I could use an artistic eye." Hannah looked to Jack, who nodded. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Show Pastor Ruth your organizational skills." As Hannah and Pastor Ruth headed toward the front door, Eleanor gathered dishes, aware of Jack rising to help. They moved into the kitchen together, the sounds of running water and clinking plates filling the comfortable silence. "You don't have to help," Eleanor said, rolling up her sleeves. "I'm sure you have better things to do than dishes in an overwrought mansion." Jack picked up a dish towel, his movements natural and easy. "Better than leaving you with all the work. Besides," he added with a hint of mischief, "I want to make sure you know how to properly wash a plate, being a billionaire and all." Eleanor flicked soap suds at him, surprising herself with the playful gesture. "I'll have you know I worked as a dishwasher in college, for 3 whole weeks." "3 weeks?" Jack raised an eyebrow, accepting a wet plate. "What happened?" "I got promoted to waitress," Eleanor admitted, "then manager. Then I met Charles at a business dinner. And well," she trailed off, focusing on scrubbing a particularly stubborn spot. "And now here you are, back at the sink," Jack said softly. "Life's funny that way." Their hands brushed as she passed him another plate. The touch lingered a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," Eleanor said suddenly, "for coming tonight, for letting Hannah come, for not judging me by that headline." Jack dried the plate with careful attention. "Thank you for not judging me by my backyard repair business and second-hand tie." "It's a nice tie," Eleanor protested, then caught his teasing smile. "Oh, you." She splashed him lightly with the sprayer, and he retaliated by shaking the dish towel at her. They both froze, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how adolescent their behavior had become. Eleanor felt a blush creep up her neck. "We're acting like teenagers." "Worse," Jack agreed, fighting a grin. "We're acting like Hannah when she does dishes." They looked at the water spots on their clothes and the soap bubbles on the counter, and couldn't help but laugh. The sound bounced off the expensive tiles and custom cabinets, transforming the formal kitchen into something warmer, more lived in. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across Gloria Shepherd's front porch as Jack stood at her door, his heart pounding against his ribs. Eleanor and Hannah waited in the car, giving him space for this moment. His fingers traced the edge of the metal case in his pocket, a familiar gesture that had become almost like a prayer over the years. Gloria opened the door before he could knock. Her silver hair caught the sunlight, forming a gentle halo around her face. The stern expression she'd worn during his last visit had softened into something warmer, more welcoming. "Come in, Jack," she said, stepping aside. "And bring your family, too." Jack turned and waved to the car. Hannah practically bounced up the steps, while Eleanor followed with graceful uncertainty. Gloria's living room was modest but immaculate, with carefully arranged photos of Theo marking different stages of his life, from a gap-toothed kindergartner to a proud soldier in dress uniform. "Sit down, all of you." Gloria gestured to the worn but comfortable couch. She settled into her armchair, hands folded in her lap, studying them with eyes that had seen too much pain but hadn't lost their kindness. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Gloria began, her voice steady, "and praying, mostly listening." She looked directly at Jack. "Tell me again about that night." "Not the facts. I know those. Tell me about my son's voice." Jack swallowed hard, his hand automatically reaching for the metal case. Hannah slipped her small hand into his free one, while Eleanor placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Theo." Jack's voice cracked, but he pressed on. "Even with the vehicle burning around us," his voice was calm, clear, like when he used to talk down scared kids in the village. He closed his eyes, remembering. He said, "Hawk, you've got that little girl waiting. You're getting out of here." Then he smiled, actually smiled through the pain, and said, "Tell Mama I finally learned what she always said about sacrifice." Gloria nodded slowly. tears tracking silent paths down her cheeks. That sounds like my boy, always thinking of others first. She stood and crossed to a cabinet, removing a familiar-looking Bible. I found his letters last week, the ones he sent from over there. She pulled out a worn envelope. This one came just days before. He wrote about you, Jack. Said you were the brother he never had, and how you two talked about opening that coffee shop someday. Jack's breath caught. He hadn't known about the letter, Gloria continued, her voice growing stronger. He wrote that you taught him more about being a man than anyone since his daddy passed. Said you showed him how to be tough and tender at the same time. She looked at Hannah. Your daddy was already changing lives back then, sweetheart. Hannah beamed through her own tears. Squeezing Jack's hand, Gloria moved to sit on the coffee table directly in front of Jack. Now, let me see that medal. With trembling fingers, Jack withdrew the case and opened it. The silver star gleamed in the late afternoon light. Gloria reached out, but instead of taking it, she placed her hand over Jack's, pressing his fingers around the medal. Theo didn't save a medal that night, she said firmly. He saved a man. A good man who's been carrying far too much guilt for far too long. Her eyes were fierce with love and certainty. Keep it, Jack, until we can place it together in a home that heals boys like you were. That's what Theo would want. Jack's shoulders shook as years of held-back tears finally broke free. Gloria pulled him into a fierce embrace, the kind only a mother can give. You're family now, she whispered. All of you. When she pulled back, Gloria turned to Eleanor, who had been watching with quiet grace. And you, Miss Whitmore, I see how you look at him, how you care for his daughter. Her smile was knowing and warm. About time this man had someone to remind him he's worthy of love. Eleanor couldn't hold back her tears any longer. Hannah moved to her side, and Eleanor gathered her close, the girl's arms wrapping tight around her waist. They clung to each other, united by love for Jack and now bound together by Gloria's blessing. The room fell quiet except for soft sniffles and the gentle ticking of the mantel clock. Through the window, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of hope, pink and gold and purple, promising a new day ahead. In that moment, they weren't a billionaire, a veteran, a widow, and a child anymore. They were simply family, brought together by sacrifice, healed by love, and blessed by grace. Gloria stood and smoothed her skirt, practical as ever, even in this emotional moment. Now then, she said, her voice warm but firm. I believe I heard something about a coffee truck that needs a grandmother's touch with the baking. The morning sun glinted off the polished chrome of the coffee truck. Red, white, and blue bunting draped its sides, and a hand-painted sign reading Theo's Table crowned the serving window. The parking lot of the old hardware store buzzed with excitement as what seemed like half the town gathered for the grand opening. Jack adjusted his tie, the same one he'd worn to the library that fateful night. His hands trembled slightly as he watched the growing crowd. Veterans in their service caps mingled with teachers, nurses, and factory workers. Even some of the skeptical council members had shown up, their formal suits looking out of place among the casual Saturday morning crowd. Hannah bounced on her toes beside the ribbon stretched across the truck's service window, her scissors ready. She wore a blue dress Eleanor had helped her pick out, with a small American flag pin on the collar. Her eyes sparkled with pride as she watched her father checking the coffee machines one last time. Everything's perfect, Daddy, she called out. Miss Eleanor made sure. Eleanor stood nearby in a simple cream blouse and navy skirt, helping the two veteran baristas Jack had hired arrange the coffee cups and pastries. Her usual elegance remained, but there was something different about her now. A warmth that came from belonging rather than observing. The temperature's just right, Eleanor said, testing the first pot of coffee. Gloria's special blend. Gloria herself sat in a place of honor near the ribbon, her weathered hands folded in her lap. The Silver Star medal rested in its presentation case on a small table beside her, catching the morning light. Pastor Ruth stepped forward, raising her hands for quiet. The crowd settled, and she offered a brief prayer. Lord, bless this venture built on sacrifice and love. Let Theo's Table be more than a place of commerce. Make it a place of healing and hope. Amen, the crowd murmured. Jack cleared his throat and stepped up to the microphone they'd set up. Thank you all for coming today. His voice caught for a moment. Eleanor moved closer, her presence steadying him. This truck represents more than coffee. It represents second chances, community, and the power of love to rebuild what's broken. He gestured to the veterans who would be working alongside him. "These men and women, my brothers and sisters in arms, they'll help me serve not just coffee, but understanding. Every kid with a library card gets a free hot chocolate. Every veteran gets a place to belong." Paige stood near the front, her camera clicking steadily, capturing the moment for the local paper. But for once, Jack didn't mind the attention. This felt right. "Hannah," he said, "would you do the honors?" Hannah stepped forward, her face serious with the responsibility. Eleanor helped her position the scissors just right on the ribbon. The crowd counted down. 3, 2, 1. The scissors snipped cleanly through, and cheers erupted. The ribbon fluttered to the ground as Hannah threw her arms around Jack's waist. He lifted her up, spinning her around as she giggled. Eleanor stepped up to the window, her movements graceful as she prepared the first cup of coffee. The rich aroma filled the air, mixing with the sound of laughter and conversation. She handed the steaming cup to Gloria, who accepted it with a trembling smile. "To Theo," Gloria said softly, raising the cup. "To Theo," the crowd echoed. The line began to form, and Jack took his place behind the counter. He worked seamlessly with his veteran crew, calling out orders, steaming milk, and greeting each customer by name. Eleanor moved between helping at the window and making sure everyone had a place to sit at the scattered tables they'd set up. Hannah appointed herself official greeter, handing out small American flags to children and collecting library cards for free hot chocolate. Her smile grew wider with each happy customer. The morning flew by in a blur of activity. The sun climbed higher, but nobody seemed eager to leave. The parking lot had become an impromptu community gathering, with people sharing stories and making connections. During a brief lull, Jack watched Eleanor kneel down to help a young girl who had spilled her hot chocolate. Instead of being upset about her dusty skirt, Eleanor laughed and helped the child clean up, then got her a fresh cup. The sight made his heart swell. Eleanor caught him watching and made her way over to the truck. She leaned against the counter, her eyes bright with joy. "This is everything we hoped for, isn't it?" Jack reached across the counter and took her hand. The noise of the crowd seemed to fade away as he looked into her eyes. All the doubt, all the pain of the past months dissolved in the warmth of her smile. "I love you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but her smile grew brighter. "I love you too, Jack Hawkins." Someone in the crowd noticed their joined hands and started clapping. The applause spread quickly, accompanied by whistles and cheers. Hannah ran over and squeezed between them, making it a group hug through the serving window. The sound of celebration rang across the parking lot, but Jack barely heard it. In that moment, with Eleanor's hand in his and Hannah's arms around them both, he felt truly home. The evening had settled into a peaceful quiet after the joyful chaos of the truck's opening day. Jack sat in his favorite armchair, contentedly tired, while Hannah dozed on the couch with her sketchbook still open. The soft glow of the table lamp cast warm shadows across their living room as crickets chirped outside. His phone buzzed. Paige's name lit up the screen. "Jack?" Her voice quivered, unusual for the normally composed reporter. "Are you sitting down?" He straightened in his chair. "What's wrong?" "I've been working late at the office. Someone sent me encrypted files, internal emails from Whitmore Industries." She paused, papers rustling in the background. "It's about the armor contracts from back then." Jack's throat tightened. He glanced at Hannah's sleeping form and quietly stepped onto the back porch, closing the door behind him. The night air felt suddenly cold. "What kind of emails?" "Communications between executives, including Marcus Vale." They knew, Jack. They knew there were problems with the armor plating series used on the MRAPs in your deployment zone. Her voice hardened with controlled anger. They deliberately delayed issuing recalls to protect a merger deal. The porch rail felt solid under his grip as the world seemed to tilt. "Are you certain?" "I verified the authenticity. There are dozens of emails spanning months. Marcus orchestrated most of it, but..." She hesitated. "But what?" "Eleanor's signature appears on several quarterly approval documents. She was copied on key discussions about delaying the recall." Jack sank onto the porch steps, his legs no longer steady. The crickets fell silent, or perhaps he just couldn't hear them anymore over the rushing in his ears. "Jack? Are you there?" "I'm here." His voice sounded distant to his own ears. "When was this?" "The emails start 3 months before." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. 3 months before Theo died, saving him from that burning MRAP. "There's more," Paige continued quietly. Marcus is already moving to control the damage. He's calling emergency board meetings, preparing statements to paint Eleanor as fully aware and complicit. Jack stared unseeing into the darkness. Just hours ago, he'd held Eleanor's hand while Hannah cut the ribbon. Just hours ago, they'd shared their first "I love you," while the crowd cheered and coffee steamed, and hope felt as solid as the ground beneath his feet. "I had to tell you first," Paige said. "The story breaks tomorrow morning. I'm sorry, Jack." He thanked her mechanically and ended the call. For a long time, he sat motionless on those steps, letting the night air chill him to the bone. Eventually, he went inside and carried Hannah to her bed, tucking her in like he had 1,000 times before. She stirred slightly. "Dad, was today the best day ever?" "Yeah, sweetheart. It was beautiful." He kissed her forehead, amazed at how steady he kept his voice. Back in the living room, Jack opened the carved wooden box where he kept Theo's silver star. The metal caught the dim light, still bright after all these years. He remembered Theo's last words, pressed into his palm along with this piece of silver. "Take it to Mama when the time is right." The metal felt heavier than ever as memories crashed over him. Eleanor's tears at his story that first night. Her genuine desire to help veterans. The way she'd stood beside him against the council's skepticism. Her smile when Hannah hugged her. Her quiet strength when facing down the gossip. The tender way she'd whispered, "I love you," just hours ago. But underneath it all lay a foundation built on hidden truth. Her company, her fortune, was stained with the blood of good men like Theo. Her signature, however buried in paperwork, linked her to decisions that cost lives. Jack sat in his dark living room, the metal cold in his palm, as the full weight of understanding settled over him. Eleanor Whitmore, the woman he'd grown to love, was connected to the choices that led to Theo's death. The truth he'd carried all these years now carried a bitter new burden. The silence stretched as Jack remained motionless in his chair, holding the metal that connected past to present, love to loss, hope to heartbreak. No more crickets sang outside. No cars passed on the quiet street. Even the house seemed to hold its breath as one man sat alone in the dark, grappling with a truth that threatened to unravel everything. The morning sun cast long shadows across Jack's driveway as he stared at his phone. Another cancellation. That made 5 in the past 2 days. The coffee truck sat silent in his driveway, its cheerful Theo's Table logo a stark contrast to the darkness settling in his chest. Shouts echoed from down the street. A group of protesters had gathered outside Eleanor's gates again, their signs bobbing like angry birds. "Justice for veterans" and "Blood money" painted in harsh red letters. Jack's hands clenched as he watched Eleanor's security team trying to maintain order. Hannah appeared at his side, her small hand slipping into his. "Why are they so mad at Miss Eleanor, Dad?" Before Jack could answer, a black sedan pulled into his driveway. 2 women in business attire stepped out, their expressions professionally neutral. One held a manila folder. "Mr. Hawkins?" The taller woman showed her credentials. "I'm Sandra Martinez from Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous concern about Hannah's welfare." Jack's military training kicked in. Stay calm. Assess the situation. "Hannah, sweetheart, go finish your breakfast, okay?" Hannah's eyes went wide with worry, but she nodded and went inside. Jack straightened his shoulders, fighting to keep his voice steady. "What kind of concerns?" "Claims of unstable living conditions, possible exploitation of a minor for publicity." Sandra consulted her notes. "Questions about your relationship with Eleanor Whitmore and how it might affect Hannah's well-being." Jack's jaw tightened. "My daughter is well cared for. She's getting straight A's, has perfect attendance, and her art teacher just recommended her for a summer program." The inspection lasted an hour. They checked Hannah's room, the kitchen, her schoolwork. They interviewed Hannah separately while Jack paced the hallway, his heart pounding. When they finally left, promising to file their report, Jack felt drained. His phone buzzed. "Eleanor." "Jack?" Her voice cracked. "I just heard about CPS. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." "Eleanor, don't." "No, listen. Marcus is behind this. He's trying to pressure me through you." She took a shaky breath. "The protesters followed Hannah's school bus this morning. They're calling you a sellout on social media. Your coffee truck bookings. We'll weather this," Jack insisted. "The truth will come out." "The truth?" Eleanor's laugh was bitter. "The truth is, my name was on those documents. My husband's company cut corners, and I benefited from it. Every penny I have is stained with." She stopped abruptly. "With Theo's blood?" Jack finished quietly. "Is that what you were going to say?" Silence stretched between them. "Meet me," Eleanor whispered. "Please. The old gazebo in Walker Park. No cameras, no protesters." An hour later, Jack parked his truck near the park's edge. The gazebo stood empty, its white paint peeling. Eleanor was already there, looking smaller somehow without her usual elegant attire, wearing simple jeans and a sweater. She didn't turn as he approached, her hands gripping the railing. "I saw Hannah's face on the news when those protesters surrounded her bus. She was terrified, Jack. We can handle this. Together." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "No." Eleanor's voice was firm despite her tears. "I won't let my past destroy your future. Hannah needs stability, not scandal. Your veterans need a leader they can trust, not someone tainted by association with Whitmore Industries. That's not fair." "You didn't know, but I should have." Her composure cracked. "I lived in luxury while good men died because of faulty equipment. I signed those papers without questioning, without caring enough to look deeper." She finally met his eyes. "I was blind, Jack. Blind and comfortable." Jack stepped closer. "You're different now. Anyone can see that." "Am I? Or am I just trying to buy redemption?" Eleanor wiped her eyes. "Marcus sent me a message this morning. He has more documents, more evidence. He'll keep coming after you and Hannah to get to me. Let him try." "You don't understand." Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. "They're going to question Theo's medal, suggest you lied about that night. They'll drag his memory through the mud to discredit you." Jack staggered as if struck. "They wouldn't dare. They already have. The story breaks tomorrow." Eleanor reached up, touching his cheek one last time. "I won't let them destroy you. Any of you. Eleanor, please. Loving me is hurting you." She stepped back, each word seeming to cause her physical pain. "Goodbye, Jack." He stood frozen as she walked to her car, unable to move, unable to speak. The engine started, and Eleanor drove away, leaving Jack alone in the gathering dusk, the weight of Theo's medal suddenly heavy in his pocket. The wooden pews of the empty church creaked softly as Jack shifted his weight, his weathered hands clasped tightly in prayer. The afternoon light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting pools of colored light across the worn carpet. Pastor Ruth sat beside him, her calm presence steady as a lighthouse in a storm. "I don't understand, Pastor." Jack's voice was rough with emotion. "How can something that felt so right turn into such a mess?" Pastor Ruth's kind eyes crinkled at the corners. "Sometimes the hardest storms come right before the greatest blessings, Jack. Remember David hiding in caves before becoming king? Or Joseph in prison before saving his people?" Hannah sat cross-legged in the front pew, her sketchbook open but empty. She looked up, her small face pinched with worry.
"Will Miss Eleanor ever come back, Daddy?"
Jack's heart squeezed at the question. He moved to sit next to his daughter, pulling her close. "I don't know, sweetheart. But what I do know is that we're going to stand strong together, just like always." "Like you and Theo did?" Hannah asked softly. "Just like that." Jack nodded, his throat tight. "Sometimes being brave means staying put when everything's falling apart around you." Pastor Ruth leaned forward, her silver hair catching the light. "Jack, I've known Eleanor for years. That woman has more integrity in her little finger than most folks have in their whole body. She's running away because she thinks she's protecting you both." "But we don't need protecting," Hannah protested, clutching her sketchbook. "We need her." Jack closed his eyes, remembering Eleanor's face when she'd driven away. The pain in her eyes had been raw, real. "She thinks her money, her name, it's all tainted now. That loving us means hurting us." "Money's just a tool, Jack," Pastor Ruth said firmly. "Like a hammer. You can use it to build something beautiful or tear something down. The choice is in the heart of the person wielding it." Hannah pulled out a crumpled drawing from her sketchbook, the one she'd made of all of them in front of the coffee truck.
"Look, Daddy, we were so happy here."
Jack studied the crayon figures, himself behind the counter, Eleanor serving coffee, Gloria sitting at a little table, all surrounded by Hannah's trademark hearts and stars. His vision blurred. "The truth is," Pastor Ruth continued, "Eleanor's been alone in that big house for years, letting other people tell her who she is and what she's worth. Sometimes it's easier to believe the lies than to fight for the truth. The empty church seemed to hold its breath as Jack stood, pacing the worn carpet between the pews. I've carried Theo's medal for years, thinking I wasn't worthy to give it to his mama. Now these people are trying to twist his sacrifice into some kind of weapon. Pastor Ruth's voice was gentle but firm. Then don't let them, Jack. You're the one who knows the truth of that night. You're the one Theo trusted with his last words. Hannah slipped her small hand into Jack's. We can be brave together, Daddy. Like you always tell me. Jack squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her simple faith. The afternoon light had shifted, painting longer shadows across the church floor. Outside, the world was still churning with protests and accusations. But in here, in this sacred space, clarity began to seep into his troubled heart. You're right, Pastor, he said finally. Running away didn't honor Theo then, and it won't honor him now. Later that night, after tucking Hannah into bed with extra hugs and prayers, Jack stood in his bedroom. The Silver Star medal sat in its case on his dresser, catching the soft lamplight. He picked it up, feeling its familiar weight. I won't let them use you as a weapon, brother, he whispered, carefully placing the medal on his nightstand. Your sacrifice meant more than that. It always will. The medal rested there, silent but significant, a reminder of both loss and love, sacrifice and honor. Jack sat on the edge of his bed, his head bowed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to face. But tonight, in the quiet of his room, he made his choice. They would stand strong. Him, Hannah, and yes, even Eleanor if she'd let them. Together, the evening crickets chirped outside his window, a peaceful chorus in the gathering dark. Jack touched the medal one last time before turning out the light. Theo's gift wouldn't be twisted into something ugly. Not on his watch. Paige Nunez's fingers flew across her keyboard, her small apartment lit only by the glow of multiple computer screens. Coffee cups littered her desk, testament to 3 sleepless nights of digging. Something about the stolen valor accusations against Jack hadn't added up from the start. Got you, she whispered, clicking through financial records. The social media posts questioning Jack's war story had exploded from nowhere, but they weren't random. They traced back to a sophisticated botnet operated by Sterling Communications, a PR firm that just happened to be on Marcus Vale's payroll. Her phone buzzed. Another veteran returning her call. Miss Nunez? The voice was gruff, but clear. This is Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez. You asked about Jack Hawkins and Theo Shepard? Paige grabbed her recorder. Yes, sir. You served with them? Same squad. 3 tours. Look, I've been seeing these lies about Jack online. They're garbage. Rodriguez's voice hardened. I was there that night. I saw everything. Paige leaned forward. Could you tell me what happened? We were running convoy security outside Kandahar. Our MRAP hit an IED. Bad one. Jack was driving. The blast knocked him out cold, and the engine compartment caught fire. Rodriguez paused, clearing his throat. Theo, man. Theo didn't hesitate. He pulled Jack out through the gunner's hatch while the whole thing was burning. Got him clear just before the ammo started cooking off. And the Silver Star? Paige prompted gently. Theo earned it pulling 3 other guys out of a collapsed building the week before. He hadn't even received it officially yet. It was still in its case when... Rodriguez's voice cracked. When he got hit. Shrapnel. He knew he wasn't going to make it. His last act was pressing that medal into Jack's hand, making him promise to get it to his mama someday. Paige wiped her eyes, professionalism momentarily forgotten. Thank you for telling me this, Sergeant. There's more, Rodriguez continued. Jack blamed himself. Wouldn't leave Theo's side even with bullets flying. Our medic had to drag him away. He's carried that guilt ever since. But anyone who was there knows Theo made his own choice. He died a hero, saving his brother. Over the next hours, more calls came in. A combat medic, a platoon leader, a door gunner. Each account matched perfectly. Jack's story was true, down to the smallest detail. And each veteran expressed the same fury at anyone questioning their fallen brother's sacrifice. Paige's research revealed more. Marcus Vale had orchestrated a systematic campaign to discredit Jack, using his PR firm to plant doubt, manipulate social media trends, and even prompt the Child Services investigation. The same firm had buried the original armor testing reports years ago. She gathered screenshots, financial records, and veteran testimonials into a folder, then made one more call. Jack? It's Paige. She heard his exhausted greeting. I can clear your name, but Eleanor must speak the truth too. The whole truth. About the company. About Marcus. About everything. What do you mean? Jack's voice was cautious. I have proof Marcus Vale orchestrated this whole smear campaign against you. He's behind the stolen valor rumors, the child services complaint, everything. But this goes deeper, all the way back to those faulty armor tests. Eleanor's signature might be on those documents, but Marcus buried the warnings. He's been covering his tracks for years. There was a long pause. You're sure about this? Absolutely. I've got your whole squad ready to go on record defending you and Theo. But Jack, this isn't just about clearing your name. This is about justice. For Theo, for other soldiers who trusted that equipment with their lives, Eleanor needs to face what her company did, even if she didn't know about it at the time. She's been carrying that guilt already, Jack said quietly, even before she knew the details. Then maybe it's time to turn that guilt into action, Paige replied. But she has to be the one to step forward, to speak the truth, no matter the cost. The line went silent again. Finally, Jack spoke. Send me everything you found. I'll make sure she sees it. Jack, Paige added before he could hang up. Your squad mates. They all said the same thing. Theo would be proud of you. She heard Jack's shaky breath. Thank you, Paige, for finding the truth. That's my job, she said simply. The rest is up to you and Eleanor. Eleanor stood at the window of her study, watching storm clouds gather over the manicured lawns of the Whitmore estate. The mansion felt emptier than ever, its grandeur a hollow shell without Jack and Hannah's warmth to fill it. Behind her, Marcus Vale's expensive shoes clicked across the hardwood floor. Be reasonable, Eleanor, Marcus said, his voice smooth as oil. You've built a life here. Think about everything you'd be throwing away. She turned to face him, noting how his perfectly tailored suit couldn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. You mean everything my husband built, don't you, Marcus? He spread his hands in a placating gesture. The foundation, the charity work, your position on the board, your entire legacy, all of it gone if you pursue this misguided crusade. Thunder rumbled outside as Eleanor moved to her desk, running her fingers over the polished wood. Interesting choice of words. Legacy. She picked up a framed photo, herself and her late husband at a charity gala. I've been thinking about legacy quite a bit lately. Then you understand what's at stake. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. The NDAs you signed are airtight. One word about those armor tests goes public, and our legal team will what? Eleanor's quiet question cut through his threat. Take my money, my house, my reputation? She set the photo down with deliberate care. What else is there to take, Marcus? His smile tightened. Don't be dramatic. We can weather this storm. Issue a statement distancing yourself from the veteran's accusations. Let our PR team handle the reporter. In a few months, no one will remember. His name is Jack, Eleanor said, steel entering her voice. And the soldier who died that night was Theodore Shepard. They're not accusations to be managed. They're people. Sons. Heroes. They're liabilities, Marcus snapped, facade cracking. And that medal story is a convenient fiction. We both know. We know nothing of the sort. Eleanor's hands curled into fists. I've seen the proof. The testimonies from his squad. The paper trail leading back to your PR firm. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Color drained from Marcus's face. Those records are sealed. Not anymore. She moved around the desk, facing him directly. You buried those testing reports. You orchestrated the cover-up when the armor failed. And when Jack's story threatened to expose it all, you tried to destroy him. I protected this company, Marcus's composure shattered. Your husband understood what was at stake. The merger would have fallen through if those reports went public. Thousands of jobs, billions in contracts, all of it saved because I made the hard choice. The hard choice? Eleanor's voice shook with rage. Men died, Marcus. Sons never came home to their mothers. And you call that a hard choice? He grabbed her arm, fingers digging in. Don't you dare judge me. You signed those quarterly reports. Your name is on every document. You enjoyed the profits just like the rest of us. Eleanor jerked free, rubbing her arm. Yes, I did. And that shame will be with me forever. She walked to a cabinet, removing a thick folder. "But unlike you, I choose to face it." Marcus went very still as she set the folder on the desk. "What is that?" "Everything. Financial records, test results, emails, the PR firm's invoices." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm testifying before the AG's office tomorrow morning." "You can't." His voice turned desperate. "The NDAs. You'll lose everything." "No, Marcus." Eleanor smiled sadly. "I already lost everything when I chose wealth over truth, when I let fear of poverty matter more than the cost of silence." She touched her cross necklace. "But God gives second chances, even to cowards like me." "I'll destroy you," he snarled, mask completely gone. "By the time our lawyers are done, you won't have a penny to your name. That precious foundation of yours? Gone. Your reputation? Ruined. Everything you've worked for, all of it, ashes." Lightning flashed outside as Eleanor walked to the door. "You're right about one thing, Marcus. I have worked for all of this." She gestured to the mansion around them. "Worked so hard I forgot to ask if I deserved it, if it was worth the cost." She opened the door. "It wasn't. Get out of my house." "You're making a terrible mistake," he warned, straightening his tie. "No," Eleanor said softly. "I made my terrible mistakes years ago. This is finally choosing right." After Marcus stormed out, Eleanor sank into her chair, trembling. The weight of what she'd just done, what she was about to do, pressed down on her chest. She picked up her phone, staring at it for a long moment before dialing. "Hello?" Gloria's voice answered, cautious but clear. "Mrs. Shepherd?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "This is Eleanor Whitmore." A pause. "Yes? Eleanor closed her eyes, gathering courage. "I'm testifying tomorrow. About the company. About the armor tests. About everything." "I see." Gloria's tone gave nothing away. "I know I have no right to ask," Eleanor whispered. "But will you? Will you stand with me when I tell the truth? When I face what my family's company did to your son?" The silence stretched so long Eleanor thought Gloria had hung up. Then, so soft, she almost missed it. "I'll stand with both my sons." Eleanor pressed a hand to her mouth, tears falling freely. "Both? Jack's carried Theo's medal all these years," Gloria said gently. "Carried his guilt too. Maybe it's time we all lay our burdens down and pick up grace instead." "Thank you," Eleanor breathed. None of us deserve grace," Gloria interrupted. "That's what makes it grace." A warmth entered her voice. "Now, dry those tears, child. Tomorrow's coming, and the truth needs a strong voice to speak it." The community hall buzzed with tension as Eleanor Whitmore stepped up to the podium. Camera lights flashed, and reporters leaned forward with their recorders. She looked different today. No designer suit or perfect makeup. Instead, she wore a simple blue dress and minimal jewelry. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone. In the front row, Gloria Shepherd sat tall and dignified, her weathered hands folded in her lap. Pastor Ruth sat beside her, head bowed, in silent prayer. Scattered throughout the crowd were dozens of veterans, including those who'd supported Jack at the city council meeting. Their faces were stern but open, waiting. Eleanor cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming today. I'm here to tell the truth about Whitmore Industries and the armor testing program that failed our troops." The room fell silent. Even the camera shutters seemed to pause. "For years, I lived in ignorance of what was happening in my husband's company. I signed papers without questioning, attended board meetings without challenging the numbers. I told myself I was just a chairman's wife, that these matters were beyond my understanding." She gripped the podium edges, her knuckles white. "But ignorance is no excuse. Not when lives were at stake. Not when brave soldiers like Theo Shepherd paid the ultimate price." At Theo's name, Gloria's chin lifted slightly. Their eyes met across the room, and Eleanor drew strength from the older woman's steady gaze. "Recently, evidence has emerged showing that Whitmore Industries cut corners on armor testing. We, rushed production to meet profit margins. My signature appears on those documents, buried in quarterly reports I should have read more carefully." The crowd murmured. A reporter started to shout a question, but Eleanor raised her hand. "Please, let me finish. This isn't about defending myself. It's about making things right. She pulled out a folder and held it up. This contains the legal documents transferring the majority of my personal fortune, approximately $2.8 billion, to the newly established Whitmore Restitution and Opportunity Fund. Gasps rippled through the audience. Camera flashes exploded. This fund will be independently governed by a board that includes veterans, community leaders, and families affected by our failures. Gloria Shepherd has agreed to serve as chair, alongside Pastor Ruth Johnson and others who understand the true cost of corporate negligence. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. The fund's first priorities will be providing cutting-edge protective gear for active duty personnel and first responders, establishing veteran support centers, and creating scholarship programs for military families. She paused, then continued more softly. Money can't bring back those we've lost. It can't erase the pain of mothers like Gloria, who lost their sons. It can't undo the trauma carried by survivors like Jack Hawkins. Near the back of the hall, Jack stood against the wall, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but he didn't look away. But money can fuel change. It can build something good from something broken. And most importantly, it can ensure these mistakes are never repeated. Eleanor stepped back from the podium, then returned for one final statement. I'm also announcing my immediate resignation from the Whitmore Industries Board. I'll cooperate fully with the Attorney General's investigation into the testing program and cover-up. The room erupted with questions. Reporters jumped to their feet, shouting over each other. But Eleanor's attention was drawn to movement in the crowd. One by one, veterans were standing. Not shouting, not clapping, just rising to their feet in silent acknowledgement. Gloria stood next to Pastor Ruth, tears streaming down her proud face. More people followed their lead until nearly everyone was standing. The applause started slowly, a few scattered claps that grew into a rolling wave of support. At the back of the hall, Jack remained against the wall, but his eyes glistened with unmistakable pride. His slight nod said more than words ever could. Eleanor felt tears threatening, but held them back. This wasn't a moment for her emotions. It was a moment for action, for change, for healing. She gathered her papers with steady hands as the applause continued to build around her. The morning sun streamed through Jack's kitchen window as he sipped his coffee, staring at the newspaper spread across his worn wooden table. Page's article dominated the front page with a bold headline: Whitmore Industries Scandal. The Full Truth Revealed. His hands shook slightly as he read through the detailed exposé had now reached national attention. Hannah sat beside him, munching on cereal and peering at the paper. Is that Miss Page's story, Dad? Sure is, sweetheart. Jack's voice was soft but steady. She did good work. The article laid out everything. The leaked emails, the testimony from whistleblowers, and most importantly, the clear evidence that Marcus Vail had orchestrated the cover-up of faulty armor testing. Eleanor's role was explained too, how she had been deliberately kept in the dark, her signature buried in massive quarterly reports that Vail had manipulated. The kitchen radio crackled with breaking news. Jack reached over and turned up the volume as the announcer's voice filled the room. In a major development this morning, the state attorney general has announced multiple criminal charges against former Whitmore Industries CFO Marcus Vail. The charges include fraud, obstruction of justice, and criminal negligence. Hannah's spoon clattered against her bowl. Does this mean the bad man is going to jail? Jack nodded slowly. Looks that way. The truth has a way of coming out, even if it takes time. His phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Turn on Channel 5. Jack grabbed the remote and flicked on the small TV in the corner. Eleanor stood at a podium outside the Attorney General's office, her posture straight, but her eyes humble. The newly formed Whitmore Restitution Opportunity Fund was making its first major announcement. Today, we're launching our initial project. Eleanor's voice was clear and determined. $5 million will go directly to providing next-generation protective gear for firefighters across 3 states. This is just the beginning of our commitment to protect those who protect us. The camera panned to show a group of firefighters standing behind her, along with Gloria Shepherd and Pastor Ruth. Jack's chest tightened as he recognized some of the faces, veterans who had served with him, now working as first responders. Dad? Hannah's voice pulled him back to the present. Can we go see the firefighters get their new gear? I think we might be able to arrange that. Jack smiled. pulling out his phone to text Eleanor back. Later that afternoon, they stood in the parking lot of the main firehouse. Crews were unloading boxes of new equipment, helmets with advanced thermal imaging, breathing apparatus with improved filtration, suits designed to withstand higher temperatures. The fire chief, a former Marine who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, was explaining the features to a group of reporters. "This gear will save lives," the chief said firmly. "No question about it." Eleanor stood slightly apart from the crowd, watching the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. When she spotted Jack and Hannah, her face lit up, but she held back, unsure of her welcome. Hannah solved that problem by running straight to her for a hug. "Miss Eleanor, did you really buy all this stuff to keep the firefighters safe?" Eleanor knelt down to Hannah's level. "The fund did, yes. But you know what? The idea came from something your dad told me once about Theo." Jack stepped closer, curious. Eleanor looked up at him with soft eyes. "Remember when you told me how Theo always said that saving one life ripples out to save many others? Well, that stuck with me. Each firefighter we protect might save dozens of families. The ripples keep going." Jack had to swallow hard before he could speak. He reached into his pocket and touched Theo's medal, which he still carried every day. The silver felt warm against his fingers. A young firefighter approached them, holding one of the new helmets. "Sir, ma'am, we'd like to show you something." He led them to where the first batch of gear was being unpacked. Each piece bore a small inscription on the inside. "In honor of SSG Theo Martinez, courage ripples forward." Gloria appeared beside them, her hand finding Jack's arm. "When Eleanor suggested the inscription, I knew it was right. Theo would have loved this." They watched as more firefighters gathered around, examining their new gear with professional appreciation. Each piece represented a potential life saved, a family kept whole, a future protected. Hannah tugged at Jack's sleeve. "Daddy? Yes, baby? Is this kind of like how Theo saved you? So you could be my dad and help other people?" Jack looked at his daughter, then at Eleanor, who was wiping tears from her eyes, and finally at Gloria, who nodded encouragingly. "That's exactly right, Hannah," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "Theo's story is saving lives even now." Soft snowflakes drifted past the tall windows of the old storefront, its newly painted sign reading Theo's House in warm copper letters. Inside, the space hummed with activity as paintbrushes swept across walls and cheerful chatter filled the air. Jack stood on a stepladder, carefully touching up the ceiling trim with a steady hand. Below him, Hannah directed a group of veterans and local kids in painting a mural of mountains and pine trees along the main wall. Her confidence had bloomed over the past weeks, and it showed in how she guided even the adults with gentle suggestions about colors and technique. "A little more blue in that shadow," Hannah called out to Tommy, a young Marine who was working on a particularly tall pine tree. "It'll make it look deeper, like it goes on forever." Eleanor moved through the space with quiet grace, distributing fresh paintbrushes and water bottles to the volunteers. She'd traded her usual elegant attire for worn jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Paint smudges decorated her sleeves, but her smile was radiant as she watched the community come together. "This place is becoming exactly what Theo would have wanted," Gloria said, arranging fresh flowers on the counter that would soon serve coffee and treats. Her eyes glistened as she took in the scene. A place of healing and hope. Jack climbed down from his ladder and stood beside Gloria, both of them watching as Eleanor helped a small girl in pigtails reach a high spot on the wall. "You know what Theo used to say about broken things?" he asked softly. Gloria nodded, her voice warm with memory. "That they shine brightest once they're mended." The space was transforming before their eyes. What had once been an abandoned storefront was becoming a warm haven. Comfortable chairs and sofas were arranged in conversation groups. Bookshelves lined one wall, and a small stage sat ready for community events. The coffee counter, built by Jack himself from reclaimed wood, curved like a welcoming smile. A group of veterans worked together installing lights, their easy camaraderie evident in their joking and laughter. Some bore visible scars, others carried wounds unseen. But here they moved with purpose, building something larger than themselves. "Miss Eleanor," called out one of the younger kids, holding up a paint-covered hand. "Can we add stars to the sky part?" Eleanor knelt beside the child, examining the mural section thoughtfully. "What do you think, Hannah? You're our artistic director." Hannah tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, considering the wall with serious attention.
"Stars would be perfect, like the ones Daddy and Theo used to see in the desert."
Jack's throat tightened at the memory. He felt a gentle touch on his arm and turned to find Gloria watching him with understanding eyes. "They're all healing here," she said quietly. "Not just the veterans. The whole town." The afternoon light began to fade, making the snow outside glow with a peaceful blue tint. Someone had put on soft Christmas music, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air as Eleanor tested the new equipment behind the counter. Jack walked over to help her, their hands brushing as she passed him a cup. The simple contact still sent warmth through his chest, even after all they'd been through. She looked up at him with those kind eyes that had first captured his heart at the library. "Try this," she said, pushing the cup toward him. "I think I'm finally getting the hang of it." He took a sip and smiled. "Perfect. You're a natural." "I had a good teacher," she replied, glancing at the coffee truck visible through the window, now parked proudly in its designated spot outside Theo's house. Hannah appeared between them, her face flushed with excitement.
"Daddy, Miss Eleanor, come see. We finished the main part of the mural."
They followed her to where the entire group had gathered, admiring the completed wall. The scene captured the essence of their town. Mountains rising behind pine forests, a winding river, and now a sky full of twinkling stars. But more than that, it captured the spirit of what they were building, a place where broken pieces could come together to make something beautiful. Gloria stepped forward, placing her hand against the wall near a particularly bright star. "This one's for you, Theo," she whispered. The group fell quiet, each person lost in their own thoughts and memories. Jack felt Hannah's small hand slip into his, while Eleanor stood close on his other side, her presence steady and sure. After a moment, Gloria turned to address the room. "I think we've done enough for today. The paint needs to dry, and you've all worked so hard. Go home to your families, get warm, and come back tomorrow. We'll be serving our first official cups of coffee at sunrise." As the volunteers began gathering their things, exchanging hugs and promises to return early, Jack watched Eleanor help Hannah clean her paintbrushes at the sink. Their heads were bent together, sharing some secret that made them both laugh, and his heart swelled with certainty. He touched the small box in his pocket, the one he'd been carrying for days now, waiting for the right moment. The simple ring inside wasn't fancy, just plain silver, sturdy and true, like the love it would represent. "I'm heading to the church for a bit," he said to Gloria, who was arranging chairs. "Need to talk to Pastor Ruth about something." Gloria's knowing smile told him she understood exactly what he was planning. She reached up and straightened his collar with maternal care. "Go on then, we'll finish up here." Jack put on his coat and stepped out into the gentle snowfall, his boots crunching on the fresh powder. Behind him, through the windows of Theo's house, he could see his family, the one he'd found in the most unexpected way, working together to build something lasting and good. The church steeple rose ahead, its cross barely visible through the falling snow. Jack walked toward it with purpose, each step taking him closer to the future he never thought he'd find again. In his pocket, the ring waited, simple and perfect, ready to ask the question his heart had known the answer to all along. Snow fell in gentle swirls outside the old brick church, its stained glass windows glowing like jewels in the evening darkness. Inside, evergreen garlands wrapped with twinkling lights draped the wooden beams, and red poinsettias lined the altar. The pews were packed with familiar faces from across town, their features softened by candlelight. Eleanor sat between Gloria and Hannah in the third row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wore a simple cream sweater and pearl earrings, a far cry from the designer suits that once defined her. These past months had changed her, stripped away the glossy veneer to reveal something more authentic underneath. Hannah leaned against Eleanor's shoulder, sketching in her ever-present notebook while the choir assembled at the front. The girl had grown more confident since summer, her artistic talent flourishing in the warmth of their unconventional family. She looked up at Eleanor with a secretive smile that made Eleanor wonder what the child knew that she didn't. Pastor Ruth stepped to the pulpit, her silver hair catching the candlelight. "Tonight we gather to celebrate hope born in humble circumstances," she began, her voice carrying to the rafters. "To remember that light shines brightest in darkness, and that love can transform even the most wounded hearts. The congregation rose for the first carol. Eleanor's voice joined the others in Silent Night, though her thoughts drifted to Jack, who'd been mysteriously absent all afternoon. He finally slipped in during the second verse, taking his place beside Hannah. His dress shirt was pressed, his silver hair neatly combed, but his fingers kept touching something in his pocket. As the final notes faded, Pastor Ruth invited anyone who felt moved to share a testimony of God's grace in their lives. Eleanor watched Jack stand, her heart quickening. He made his way to the front, turning to face the congregation. The same quiet strength that had first drawn her to him radiated from his weathered features. "A year ago," Jack began, his deep voice steady, "I stood in our library sharing a story of sacrifice, my brother Theo's last gift to me. I thought that story was about loss, about a debt I could never repay." He paused, his gaze finding Eleanor's. But God had a different ending in mind. Eleanor felt Gloria's hand slip into hers, squeezing gently. "That night, a remarkable woman heard my story and saw not my shame, but my worth," Jack continued. "She helped me understand that Theo's sacrifice wasn't meant to be a burden, but a foundation to build something new." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing something small that caught the candlelight. "Eleanor," he said softly, "would you join me?" Eleanor's legs felt unsteady as she walked to the front. Jack's eyes were warm with love as he took her hand. "This ring," he said, holding up a simple silver band, "was fashioned from metal salvaged from a retired map vehicle, the same kind that protected my unit that night in the desert, the same kind your company built." His voice grew thick with emotion. "What was once a symbol of war and loss has been transformed into something beautiful, just like us." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks as Jack went down on one knee. The entire congregation seemed to hold its breath. "Eleanor Whitmore, you helped me see that courage isn't just about facing death. It's about choosing life, choosing love, choosing to build something good from the broken pieces." He held up the ring. "Will you build that life with me? Will you marry me?" Eleanor's voice trembled as she answered, "Yes, Jack Hawkins. Yes, with all my heart." As Jack slipped the ring onto her finger, a small figure darted from the pews. Hannah threw herself into their arms, nearly knocking them both over. Jack caught her with a laugh, pulling both Eleanor and Hannah into a tight embrace. The church erupted in cheers and applause. Gloria wiped tears from her eyes, beaming. Pastor Ruth raised her hands in blessing over the newly engaged couple and their daughter. "See," Hannah whispered, her face glowing. "I told you Christmas miracles really happen." The congregation surged forward to congratulate them. Eleanor felt surrounded by love. Not the cold approval she'd known in corporate boardrooms, but genuine affection from people who had seen her at her worst and still welcomed her as family. Jack kept his arm around her waist, steady and sure. Eleanor touched the ring on her finger, marveling at how something forged in war could become a symbol of such peace. Like her fortune now funding veteran support programs, like Theo's medal finding its place of honor in their community center, like her own heart opening to love again, redemption was possible. Love could truly transform anything. The church bells began to ring, their joyful pealing carrying across the snow-covered town. Inside, the congregation broke into Joy to the World, voices lifted in celebration of not just Christmas, but the promise of new beginnings. Eleanor sang too, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Jack pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. Hannah stood between them, one hand in each of theirs, completing their circle of love. Together they faced their future, built on truth, strengthened by grace, and illuminated by the kind of love that could redeem even the deepest wounds. The candlelight caught the simple silver band on Eleanor's finger, making it glow like a star of hope in the Christmas night. Christmas morning dawned crisp and bright over the newly renovated storefront of Theo's house. Fresh snow blanketed the sidewalks, and holiday wreaths adorned the gleaming windows. The brick facade had been restored to its original warmth, with Theo's House, Where Courage Meets Compassion, painted in dignified gold letters above the entrance. Inside, the space hummed with anticipation. Veterans in pressed uniforms mingled with families in their Christmas best. Children darted between legs, their eyes wide at the towering Christmas tree decorated with handmade ornaments, each one bearing the name of a local service member. Jack stood near the front, adjusting his tie nervously. Hannah had helped pick it out, forest green with tiny silver stars. Eleanor stepped beside him, squeezing his hand. She wore a simple red wool dress, her engagement ring catching the light from the Christmas tree. "You ready?" she whispered. Jack nodded, his eyes fixed on the wooden shadow box mounted on the wall. Its rich mahogany frame held not just Theo's silver star, but also his photograph, young, proud, smiling in his dress uniform. Below it, a brass plaque read, "In memory of Theodore James Shepard, greater love hath no man than this." Gloria approached slowly, her silver hair elegantly swept back, wearing her Sunday best and carrying a small Bible. The crowd parted respectfully. Pastor Ruth followed, carrying the ribbon and ceremonial scissors. "Friends, family, neighbors," Pastor Ruth began, her voice carrying through the hushed room. "We gather on this Christmas day to dedicate this place of healing and hope. Theo's house will stand as more than a memorial. It will be a living testament to the power of sacrifice, redemption, and community." Gloria stepped forward, her head high despite the tears in her eyes. "My son believed in service above self. He believed in second chances and in lifting others up." She turned to Jack and Eleanor. "Through you both, his spirit of compassion lives on. This place will help veterans find their way home, guide young people toward purpose, and remind us all that love is stronger than loss." Hannah moved to stand between Jack and Eleanor, clutching her sketchbook. She'd drawn the initial designs for the interior, warm colors, comfortable seating areas, a study space for kids, and a counseling room decorated with nature scenes. Now her vision had come to life. Eleanor spoke next, her voice steady. "The Whitmore Restitution Fund begins here, with this promise. No veteran who walks through these doors will walk alone. No child will lack for mentorship. No family will be turned away." She looked at Jack, then Gloria. "Through truth and grace, we found our way to healing. May others find their path here too." Jack stepped forward, the weight of the moment visible in his bearing. "Theo saved more than my life that night in the desert. He saved my soul. When he pressed that medal into my hand, he wasn't just giving me an award, he was giving me a purpose." His voice caught. "Today, we place this medal where it truly belongs, in a home built on courage and compassion." Gloria opened her Bible and read from Isaiah. "They shall build up the ancient ruins. They shall raise up the former devastations. They shall repair the ruined cities." She closed the book and placed her hand on the shadow box. "Let this place be blessed as a shelter for the wounded, a haven for the searching, and a home for all who seek healing." Pastor Ruth handed the ribbon and scissors to Hannah. "Would you do the honors, sweetheart?" Hannah stepped forward, her hands steady as she cut the red ribbon. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Veterans stood at attention, offering crisp salutes to Theo's photograph. Outside, the first flakes of new snow began to fall. The coffee truck, Theo's table, painted proudly on its side, sat ready to serve, its windows steamy with warmth. A banner stretched across the front. "Courage plus compassion. Home." Families began filing out into the snow, accepting steaming cups of cocoa topped with whipped cream. Children caught snowflakes on their tongues, while veterans shared quiet conversations on the newly installed benches. Jack, Eleanor, Hannah, and Gloria stood together near the truck, their breath visible in the cold air. Hannah had her arm linked through Gloria's, while Jack held Eleanor close. They watched as the community they'd helped build celebrated around them, a tapestry of lives woven together through loss, love, and redemption. The snow continued its gentle descent, dusting their shoulders like a blessing. In that moment, they weren't just individuals brought together by circumstance. They were a family, stitched by grace, standing strong in the light of Christmas Day. Gloria squeezed Hannah's hand and smiled at Jack and Eleanor. No words were needed. In the falling snow, with warmth radiating from the building behind them and love surrounding them, they had all found their way home. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Hawk Hawkins, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.